But today I'm really excited to share this. These principles have changed my life. More on that in a little bit, but and of course the slides are not progressing. There we go. Here's what we're going to talk about today. The EQ principle. EQ is just shorthand for emotional intelligence. I'm sure you already knew that. But something that we can miss or overlook a lot of times is that the dissemination of information is an emotional process. We think it's logical in speech, it's emotional. What we hear, how we hear it, how we interpret it, all of those things, how we share it with others, all comes through a lens of our emotional filters. It's not what we say, it's how people hear it and receive it. Then we're going to learn this so that we are better equipped to make powerful connections. Connect with your team members so they each know they are seen, they are valued, and they are known. How many of you feel seen, valued, and known in your workplace? And has that always been the case? Or is that something you would like to experience at some point in your career? But it makes a big difference when we are appreciated and when we know that we are acknowledged. We want to give more and our best. So it's really important. At the end of the training today, you'll have a brief introduction of the 9 Enneagram types and how they are present and show up in the workplace. And you will also have a bit of a difference, a bit of an understanding of the difference a thoughtful, well-differentiated leader can make for your team and your organization. By well-differentiated, I mean someone who is able to regulate their emotions well and understand their emotions, where they begin and others end. So that's what we're shooting for. So who am I? And what business do I have to tell you about these things? I'm a spiritual leader for over 20 years, 25 years now. Oh, that makes me sound old. Don't do the math. I'm an author, a podcaster. I have a podcast called Pursuing Uncomfortable because it makes a huge difference when we can lean into the difficult and uncomfortable things and overcome them. So check that out if you'd like to. Shameless self-promotion. I'm also the founder and CEO of Melissa Ebken Consulting and Melissa Ebken Light Life and Love Ministries. These do really similar work. One is more intentionally spirit-driven, and the other comes at it from a different angle. So it's the same information, it's just packaged with some different nuances. A little bit about me. Again, I've been a pastor for 25 years. I was a molecular biologist by training. I graduated from the University of Illinois in Chicago with a biology degree. I was a lab rat. I was totally into the genetics stuff and thought about going into genetics counseling and whatnot. I was an Army helicopter mechanic for 10 years. I joined the Illinois Army National Guard when I was 17 and served them for 10 years. I live in central Illinois, although someday I would love to live in eastern Tennessee. And my greatest passion is to guide people through the abyss. Whatever abyss they're in, I would like to say, hey, you're not there alone. Here's a life preserver until you are able to get your sea legs under you and get yourself through it. That's what lights me up every day. Also, I'm obsessed with the Chicago Cubs. It's ridiculous, my obsession with the Cubs, but you know, what are you gonna do? And I watched the show Everybody Loves Raymond as a research project. We'll get into a little bit more about that later and how that can be useful for you, even though it may drive you a little crazy. But at any rate, that's just a little bit about me. Oh, and that was my adorable little family there, the goobers I live with and love each day. So one well-differentiated leader can make a difference in your organization. Now, ideally, we would love everyone to be well-differentiated, and that would be great. And while that's the goal, it can start with just one person. Ideally, the more authority or power or leadership that person has, the quicker the results will come. But one well-differentiated leader can make a difference. So I'm going to go through these Enneagram types really quickly, and we will have time for question and answer later. I'm kind of rushing through these because I really want to get to the conversation later. Also, I could spend 4.5 days just talking about the Enneagram. So I want to go through it quickly and not get lost in the rabbit hole.
Melissa, before we get started on this, I feel like some people may have encountered this in the past in their workplace, but can you tell us, like, are you going to give us a description of exactly what the Enneagram is? Like, there's all these various types, but can you walk it back and tell us like what the history is, or like a little bit more about the basics?
Yeah, thank you for that, because that really gives it some shape and form. The Enneagram is an ancient tool. The Enneagram comes from the Desert Fathers in the Christian tradition and from the Sufis in the Muslim tradition. So we're talking in the Christian tradition about, from the 1st century in the modern era, and in the Muslim tradition from about the 800s on forward. So the spiritual, the aesthetics, the mystics in these traditions, they did not get together and say, let's build a system that comes from our base compulsions. What they said is, there's a real correlation from the base compulsions or the base issues that we experience. And there's some predictability about how a person acts under stress in these. So we all have a basic tendency. And the thing about the Enneagram versus other models, if you ask me about my Myers-Briggs or my DISC or anything like that, I'm really excited to tell you what it is, who I am in that. When it comes to the Enneagram, it's embarrassing. I mean, it talks about who we are under stress and when we're falling apart. And it's like, okay, let's move on. But the Enneagram, because of that, is so helpful. It arises within us from our earliest days on the planet. So as we are experiencing healthy attachment or unhealthy attachment as infants, the experiences we have in those first formative years of life, the Enneagram personality types are developing within us. So, yeah, there are, if you look in the Christian tradition, 7 deadly sins, you may have heard that. That describes these base compulsions. So we're going to look at each of these. There are 9, actually, despite the popularity of 7. And we're going to see how each of these can be developed. And again, we're doing this so that we can understand the different ways that people filter information and share information and show up in the workplace. So the ones in the Enneagram 1, their base compulsion or tendency, might be an easier word, better word, is anger. These are the perfectionists. They tend to be very serious people, and they're always frustrated because it's not perfect. And life and people are not what they should be. They're the people that are, oh, I messed up. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? They're always berating themselves and others, but they don't always realize that they're critical of others, because inside they're 10 times more critical of themselves for not being perfect. The 2s, their primary compulsion or tendency is pride. 2s find their worth and affirmation in others. They seek to avoid any inner turmoil, and their way of doing that is by always helping others. One of the things about a 2 is that they do for others what their deepest self really needs done for them. So in an office setting, 2s are always going to be the ones that are getting together a card for someone who's experienced a loss. 2s are going to ensure that there's food in the break room. They're going to be the ones that ensure that you have what you need. That's how a 2 will often show up.
Melissa, I do want to say that out of everybody that when we've done these, large percentages of proposal people turn out to be twos. They're very much like providers of support and assistance. Like when you talk about like making sure that everybody's cared for in the way that you know how you just described that, I've seen this emerge a lot on teams where I am. So I just want to kind of like drop that in, that like twos are a critical
Yeah,
part of our industry. Yeah.
and that's probably indicative that they want their place to be better. So they are more apt to sign up for these and to participate in these things because they do want to contribute to a better workplace environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Threes. Okay, threes, their primary tendency or compulsion is deceit. Threes are the people that win. They figure out what they need to do in that situation to be the best that they can be. For instance, if you imagine a long hallway that has many rooms on the side, a three can open the door in this room and within a second figure out who they need to be and how they need to be present in order to be great in that room. And then they can shut the door, go down the hall, and keep doing that. They're often actors. They know how to do what they need to do. They are great salespeople. They know exactly what they need to do in that situation to make the sale. So that's a three. Anybody need me to stop at this point and look at these three?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Melissa, with most of these, we're not seeing any comments or questions here, but I really love the approach that you're talking about what our primary compulsion is, because on so many levels, we talk about, you know, the general characteristics of folks that have these attributes like achiever or helper. But I think the fact that we're boiling it down to like, where do we have those communication challenges and risks really helps us understand a lot more about the depth of these folks' personalities. And I think that that is something that we can all take with us in this message. So thank you for having that perspective.
Absolutely. And a
Caitlin
four.
here, sorry, real quick. Caitlin does say that I feel like people in sales would be threes. Like that's
Yeah,
validating that for you.
In a second who they need to be in that moment. Do they need to be the one that identifies with your struggle? Do they need to be the sage that knows the information you need? They can tell in a second who they need to be.
And we do have one real quick question. I know you and I have had conversations about this before, about where do we take the test to find out which number we are. And you have mentioned, and Paul also said in the comments just a moment ago, that figuring out what you are is kind of more of a journey than simply completing the test. So are you comfortable pausing and answering that?
A test is the worst way to interact with the Enneagram. A book, and I highly recommend this one. There are several books out there. This one is bigger, it has more information, but it's so profound. When you read this particular book, and I have a link I can share with you, Catherine, it's on that list, the Enneagram book by Richard Rohr. This book, when you read it, you will find yourself. You will have yourself, your entire life explained to you, and it's going to be uncanny what you find there. So yeah, Enneagram is not a test taking thing. I get a different result every time I try to take an Enneagram test, but interact with it, lean into it. As you read the longer descriptions, you're going to say, oh yeah, I recognize that and so, and I recognize that and so. But then one of them is really going to hit you upside the head and you're going to feel, oh, and that's probably a good indication that that might be who you are.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So fours, these are folks whose primary compulsion is envy. Fours are more at home creating things, artists. They avoid ordinariness, anything that's current, conventional, normal. They don't want any part of that. They love the eccentric. And they also have, they love their times of depression. A four needs to wallow in the sadness and the depression for a while. Fours are often the stereotype for a four, which again, it's a stereotype, is the artist, the misunderstood artist, but that's often a four. A five is the investigator. The best way I can describe a five to you is if an Enneagram 5 needs to find a new dentist, Before they make their choice, they're going to know the names of every dentist in the area. They're going to know their credentials, where they went to school, the ratings and reviews they have on their practice, and all the information about it. The fives are investigators. Their primary compulsion is avarice. They have a huge need for material and wealth and gain, but they do this through knowledge, and they're always terrified that they won't have enough knowledge. So if there's just one more class, one more semester, one more seminar, that's a 5. An Enneagram 6. In Western culture in the United States, this is the most common Enneagram type. Their primary compulsion is fear. Sixes crave security. They tend toward traditionalism. They both crave and fear authority. So there are two different aspects of being a 6, but 6s are often the law and order types. They crave authority, but they're also terrified of authority. So they'll either act out, and they're often criminals, or they will demand law and order, and they'll be policemen and women, or somehow working to maintain that all the rules are kept. They have, their compulsion is fear, so they're always very well aware of the worst case scenario and imagine everything that can go wrong and do everything they can to prevent that from happening. So that's a 6, but they're also loyal, ready to assume responsibility and self-sacrifice. A 7. 7s are their primary compulsion is gluttony. They are idealists. They need to be working for a good cause, and they do everything they can to avoid emotional pain. They are the ones that want to be happy. A good example of a 7, my friend April, when COVID came and all the cruise ships shut down, her immediate response was, well, this is the perfect time to go on a cruise. Nobody's there. Avoiding one's emotional turmoil through having fun. They're always the ones that are going to be organizing the fun things in the office. More is better. Their highest goal is happiness. Okay, 8s. The primary compulsion is lust. 8s address life openly and directly. They are confronters. 8s can't feel like you can't be trusted until they've banged up against an idea or a person and found them to be solid and worthwhile. 8s will always, almost always, come to the rescue of those who are oppressed or defenseless. 8s are the people who show up in the office that are always opposed to anything new or any new idea. They will butt up against it. And these are good to have around, because if an idea is not solid, an 8 in the room is going to show where it's weak. An 8 is the one who, if their kid is getting treated unfairly at school, the 8's coming in hot, ready to confront and what's going on. But a lot of things get done because of 8s. And then 9s. 9s are the peacemakers. Their primary compulsion is sloth. They are able to see the logic and truth in all the positions. Each position makes as much sense as the other because they can see how they all come together. Therefore, 9s really struggle to identify their own voice. 9s are great mediators, but when things get intense, 9s withdraw. So 9s are the ones that check out when things get difficult. Excuse me. If you see someone shut down under too much intensity, there's a good chance they may be a 9. 9s are prone, because of this tendency to withdraw and check out. 9s are highly susceptible to addictive behaviors. 9s do not want to distress others and often feel like asserting their own voice would cause conflict, and 9s avoid conflict at any cost. Now, a healthy 9 will learn how to manage that, but that is a quick run through of the Enneagram types. So I'm going to stop the screen share for a minute And before we go into okay, I've lost my Zoom screen. Before we go into the rest of the presentation, I just want to check in real quick, see how everyone's doing, what questions there are, and am I still here? Anyone out there?
You are. I'm so sorry. I was muted. My sincere apologies. Yeah, so Lydia asks whether or not you can be more than one type.
No. However, when you do go into the Enneagram, there are subtypes. So for instance, I'm a 9, and I have a lot of 8 energy that influences me, especially as I mature in years and emotionally. I have learned that to get rid of the anxiety of conflict is often by engaging and addressing the conflict so that it can be gone instead of withdrawing from it. So no, you'll have one type, but there are wings, they call them, that offer other subtypes. So like you may be just a full-on 7, or you may be a 7 wing 8 or a 7 wing 6, and only a wing from an adjacent number. Great question.
So if you're like a 3, you could be a 2 or a 4 wing, that kind of a thing. Like
yes,
you have kind of okay. Yeah, I just did a quick Google search and found like a definition of how to find your wing. So I popped that into the chat as well for folks that want to see that. Other than that, I love how Paul says that a healthy 8 is a fantastic person to have at your back. And I think, Melissa, do you think you could tell us a little bit more about folks who are challengers? Because I would believe that we see a lot of folks in that bucket in our everyday lives as well that are technical team members who are skeptical about our process changes.
Yeah, 8s are champions of anyone who's being overlooked or oppressed. 8s are going to, again, it's just like that picture of the rams that were butting heads. They're going to butt heads with ideas, they're going to butt heads with people, but it's not for the sake of butting heads. It's for the sake of finding out what works well, and what's not worth having around. If you have an 8 in your group and you're in a social situation, that 8 is going to have your back no matter what. If you're in an office situation, if you're brainstorming new ideas, an 8 is going to resist and shoot down every one, not to be cantankerous, but to find out what has enough merit to stand and to grow legs. So 8s are really good to have on a team. Every Enneagram number is really good to have on a team. There's not one to aspire to or one to neglect. They are each valuable.
Oh, I love that perspective. Yeah, we just have to figure out how to communicate with each of them, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah, I love that.
Understand that those numbers are probably represented in your office and in your team. A terrible way to use the Enneagram is to assign numbers to people in your life, because only that person can identify those things within them. But you can see some things that I'm guessing that this person might be a 3, therefore I'm going to communicate with them this way. But don't paint them as they are this, or you're probably going to be wrong.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of these tools be used in some kind of challenging ways in corporate environments where folks will try to, like I've seen some unscrupulous leaders kind of pick at the painful parts in everybody's personality once they find out who they are. And so I just want to emphasize here, and I think, Melissa, I'd be interested to know on your perspective here as well, but like responsible use of these tools is extremely important for us to emphasize as well. Like we want to make sure that we are honoring and respecting everybody who has these characteristics, right?
Absolutely. And the greatest use of any tool for self-discovery is for self-discovery. The more you understand yourself, your compulsions, your tendencies, your instincts, your reactions, your greatest go-to behaviors, and your worst go-to behaviors. The more you understand about yourself, one, the better you're going to be. And two, the more you honor that in others, because you know how hard it is to do that in yourself. And so you respect that others have a lot in their lives that you don't see, and that they are trying to show up well as also.
Oh, and that's particularly important now in this like post pandemic, like current burnout stage. What you just said is so salient, that we cut each other some slack and that we spend the time understanding what's happening at work and away. So, okay, thank you for the short interruption there. I do appreciate you kind of opening up the conversation. And Paul says, "Yay, a fellow 9. I'm a 9-wing 1." So, so you've got a couple, you've got a partner in crime here.
Let's cancel plans together later. That would be my joke for a fellow 9.
Just stay home in your
Yeah, let's make plans
fuzzy
and
PJs.
totally cancel and withdraw later. Okay, so yeah, let's jump back into it here.
Okay.
So what do we do with this knowledge? What's next? As I mentioned just a while ago, it's the most important work is knowing yourself. Again, the more you know yourself, the more doors this opens in all aspects of your life. But when you know yourself, you can know your team. And that's what we want to do. I feel like there are so many leaders that, one, don't realize they're leaders, because there's power that comes from authority, and there's power that just comes organically from living, breathing, and moving in this world, and we each have influence. So there's quantified power and just the power of being in the room. So we want to use that well. We want to use it from a place of goodness and from a place that brings about a good influence in others. And the more we know about ourselves, the more we'll be able to do that and empower that in others. That's the thing. So leaders don't often have training in the skills of being a good human being and managing others. They're often promoted because they can do certain tasks. That's also important. But it's the skills of human relationships that really differentiate good leaders from others. And I mentioned I'm a ridiculous Cub fan. And here are 2 great examples of these principles. On October 25th, 2011, Tom Ricketts, the chairman of the ownership group of the Chicago Cubs, had a press conference and announced that Theo Epstein would be the new president of baseball operations. That was the day, October 25th, 2011, that I knew a championship was coming to Chicago, because Theo Epstein was going to uproot and replant the culture from the tip top in his office all the way down to the volunteers at the lowest level of the organization. He was very clear what the company values were, what it meant to be in the Cubs organization, and that it would be expected and enforced. And that made all the difference. He got rid of a lot of players that did not embody those values. They were good players, but they weren't good clubhouse guys, was the language that they used in the baseball world. He wanted people that not only were talented, but could relate to each other. He said that he wants people to show up each day that not only want to win for themselves, but just as much want to win for their teammates, that they would love to see their great friends experience the thrill of victory as much or even more than for themselves. He said, when you have a group of people that want that, the championship is inevitable. And so he set standards and values for the entire organization, from the kid that came and picked up coffee orders at the minor leagues all the way to his office in Chicago. David Ross was a 3rd string catcher that they brought in specifically to pair up with John Lester. But David Ross was a 3rd string catcher. There were 2 catchers above him in the roster, but they don't win without David Ross. And here's why. Every day when David Ross came to that clubhouse, he took time to speak to every single teammate in the clubhouse. He knew their names. He knew the names of their family members. He knew the things they cared about. And because he had that connection with them, he was able to hold them accountable and say, hey, you're not putting in the work and it showed up today. Or, hey, I know you're frustrated because things didn't go your way today, but you keep showing up and you keep putting in the work. It's going to turn around. Hang in there. It was the power of relationships that he had. And if you go fast forward to 2016, when they clinched, spoiler alert, if you didn't know this already, but the Cubs won the World Series in 2016. And in the interviews after the game, and then the coverage after the game, there's one person that they hoisted on their shoulders. It was David Ross. He was the heart of that team. He was the one they all gave credit to of why they wanted to win so badly and how they were able to win so well. So the power of one well-differentiated leader can make a huge difference in your company.
Melissa, I just want to say that for the vast majority of proposal teams, most of us are either kind of middle managers. We're not in the executive ranks. And I will say, I love that story so much that you brought to our group, because I have seen folks in those roles who have had the same kind of inspiring message towards sales teams, towards executive leaders, and who kind of help folks stay the course and execute the strategy and like maintain that emotional fortitude. And I love hearing about it in a sports context. And I would say that so many people who are on this call right now have the potential to be that person.
Absolutely. And again, you get that way through your own inner work, through your own self-discovery, and then being curious, caring about others. The more you learn about yourself, the more you're going to learn about others. And the more you're going to care about others and connect with people. And here's some truths that I want to share. Does anybody have any experience with anxiety? Anxiety is
probably all of us.
viral, fastest moving thing on the planet. I love starting workshops during COVID with what is transmitted faster than anything else on the planet. You're right, anxiety. As soon as you walk into a room, you can feel it if it's there. So anxiety serves a purpose evolutionarily. It kept us alive. But our bodies, our reptilian parts of our brain, the amygdala that manages the anxiety and interprets it in us, doesn't know the difference between a saber-toothed tiger running straight at us with salivary glands dipping and a coworker that's demanding something from us. So our brain goes into fight or flight anytime that there's anxiety. So it does terrible things to us, even though it also serves an important purpose. But when there is anxiety at work, it can completely debilitate anyone. And that's true anywhere, at work or at home or anywhere else. In anxious systems, people want to relieve their anxiety. And the primary behaviors, the instinctual gut level behaviors, are to get rid of the anxiety. And a lot of times that will happen by just coming into a herd mentality. And so you want to be aware of that. Be a detective of anxiety in your workplaces, and you will be shocked at what you learn. Grow the mindset of tracking anxiety. Who has it? Who avoids it? Who transmits it? And try to picture it like a football, because if you're anxious, you're going to hand it off to someone else. See who takes it.
Melissa, can we pick at that point a little bit here? Because I want to tell you the number of folks that I'm hearing right now who are being affected by anxious leaders is really overwhelming, because of this economic climate where everybody's feeling uncertain. We have these financial challenges, layoffs in the tech space, right? And I have been getting a ton of DMs from people saying, like, my manager is taking these steps and I feel like I'm under fire. And so I think it's really obvious when a leader in an organization can't manage their anxiety well. Do you have any advice in this, or will you be addressing this later about how we can maybe interact with our anxious managers and help them feel like everything's under control?
Absolutely. Because that is such a huge issue. My favorite definition of leadership is the one who can maintain calm in the presence of chaos. So when you're in a place and you're in a room that's surrounded by anxiety, if you can stay calm, and by calm, I mean, don't give in to the fight or flight. Start counting down from 100 by sevens, or recite the beginning of the Gettysburg Address, whatever it is, that it re-engages your thinking mind so that you can think instead of relying on instincts to keep you alive from the saber-toothed tiger. But that's what anxiety does to us. It makes us dumb. It really makes us stupid. So do what you have to do to trigger your mind to think about something. Give yourself a little puzzle that you can't just solve without thinking, something that you have to think. And then if you're wanting to help your manager, your direct leader in their anxiety, acknowledge the pressure they're under. If you can go in with a cup of water or a cup of coffee or just something that might be helpful, set it down there and just take a deep breath, and you're very calm, because as aggressive as anxiety is, calm is contagious as well. And monitor your own breathing so that you're breathing deep, controlled breaths, and just say, wow, I can sense you're under a lot of pressure. And just let that stay there and let them speak. You can't bind their anxiety for them. You can't fix their anxiety for them, but you can make your calmness contagious and give them an opportunity to breathe and get the wind out of that sail. And then maybe they can reconnect with their higher functioning systems.
Thank you, Melissa, because in the past I have not done what you're describing, and I have fanned the flames personally. Like I'm fully comfortable explaining to all y'all where I've had these problems in my own career. And I really thank you so much for that advice, because I think that's really salient for the folks here who are on the call. Lydia says it's a little bit like talking to toddlers, like de-escalating. And yeah, because your mindset, right? Like,
I understand that these rocks are now your best friends. So let's talk about what that means for us. Yeah. Yeah, anyone with kids knows that nobody in the parenting book or the parenting world talks about what to do with all the rocks that now have to live inside your house. And I really think that's a gap. But anyway, anxiety that remains unresolved in one relationship will definitely play out in other relationships. What that means is, if with my partner in my domestic life, if I am not able through my anxiety to articulate my own wants and needs and desires, that same thing is going to be lacking in the workplace. However, the good news is, if I conquer it in one place, it will spill over to the others. So if I'm able to be brave for 5 seconds and just channel some energy and speak out my own voice and find my voice and my opinions and my truth in one place, then I'm going to be able to do it in other places too. So we have a few different laboratories to work in and work on ourselves. The most powerful laboratory is a family of origin. If we can do that in the family in which we were raised, the rest of the life is piece of cake. But the people that you live with and interact most frequently, those are going to be the most powerful relationships you have. And if you can do these things in those relationships, it's going to spill over into others. The third one here is one we mentioned earlier: the dissemination of information is an emotional process. We're going to have it, receive it through all of these different lenses. So for instance, a 9 and a 3 and a 5 are going to receive the same news very differently. A 9 is going to want to withdraw. That's pretty intense. What did I say? A 9, a 5, and a 3. A 3 is already coming up with strategies. They are becoming who they need to be to make it happen. A 5 is already feeling the fear that they don't know what they need to know, and they need to launch into research so that they can know what they need to know. Same information, 3 people receiving it quite differently. And then the lens that they receive it is going to be the lens that they incorporate it for themselves and share it with others. Okay, your position in the system usually trumps the gravitas of your personality. So we can have an unpaid intern that's there a couple hours a week in the office, and they can have all of these principles, and they can embody a really high emotional EQ. That's going to have an effect on the workplace, but not as much as if the boss did or the supervisor. So the higher up in the system we can get these principles incorporated, the better it is for everyone.
So Melissa, in other words, we really need to figure this out if we're trying to climb the corporate ladder.
Yes,
Like figure it out now before
absolutely.
we start taking on management roles. Yeah.
It's these skills that are going to propel you, catapult you up the ladder, because these skills are going to bring out the best in your teams. When you have what I call a coach approach to management, where if you could say, Catherine, I'm going to meet with you every week, and we get together. It's like, hey, Catherine, what have been your obstacles this week? And we have a relationship where you feel it's a safe place to talk about that. That's part of establishing that. And then I ask you questions of, okay, how do you plan to address these obstacles? What information do you need? What support do you need from me? That's a completely different situation, isn't it? And if we can learn to ask open-ended questions to empower our team members as bosses, that's going to be amazing. Amazing. Also, hard. It's difficult because we want to jump in and fix it. Especially if we're twos, we're going to want to bind your pain and help you to be as happy as you can be. Human beings often reach their potential only when they are challenged the most. Friedrich Nietzsche said that you stare into the abyss and the abyss stares back. And it's in those moments of greatest challenge that we usually find what our strengths really are and how strong we can be. So don't let challenge drown you. It's an educational tool. And effective leaders bring calm and restore systemic stability through a non-anxious presence. If you can do only that as a result from this, if you can learn to take a breath, reconnect from your instinctual brain to your prefrontal cortex and your higher executive functions in the midst of chaos, you're going to bring about a difference in your workplace. And people are going to be drawn to you like a magnet. So that, I ran through a lot of stuff very quickly.
I'm not seeing any questions, but we're certainly happy to Melissa, is it time for a kind of Q&A or?
Yeah, we are at that point. I stopped the screen share so that we could look each other in the eyes if we want to. And
yeah, my apologies. So y'all, I got to tell you, I have been making some small missteps at setting up our Zooms, and I accidentally hamstrung myself from being able to share video on this when Zoom crashed a minute ago. So you'll be understanding, hopefully, that we can have a conversation. But sadly, I can't turn on my video right now. But I'm not seeing anything else really come up in the chat. I think this is really important. Given our economic state today, and given the fact, like, just the part of you talking about anxiety that's contagious from leaders is something that I know 100% I have been guilty of inflicting that on my teams in the past. It's something I'm really trying to work on, but it is so top of mind for everybody in the tech space, particularly right now. All of the layoffs, all of the process changes, right? And so that's why I think this message is so important today, is that even if we take small steps to kind of assuage our own anxiety, incrementally improve over time, we can have a positive impact on so many other folks in our organization. And that's what, Melissa, that's what I really am taking away today. And what I love about your message is that, like, we don't have to be perfect at it, but if we spend some time understanding our teams, we spend some time understanding ourselves, and just become like what you said just now, a magnet for others to confide in or to support, then we are all going to have a much better time at work. So that's what I'm
And
taking away.
you'll be able to empower other people. And, all of that you just described is going to make you not only a better person, a more likable person, but it's going to give you the positioning to be a good boss, to be able to hold people accountable without making them feel like they're terrible people. That's a big nuance between an effective boss and an ineffective boss. Anybody can make someone feel like they're garbage, but the person that can point out the problem, hold them to a higher standard, and empower them, that's magic. Well, it's
Whew,
not magic, but
it's
that's
scary.
secret sauce.
And it's scary. It's scary to take those steps to become more bold in such an environment. But that's the only way we grow as a team.
Yeah. If we
Absolutely.
have a moment, I can teach you how to create a ritual that will help you dissolve your anxiety.
Real quick, before I 10 for 10, let's do that. And I want to make sure we don't lose track of Paul's question that they just asked here. So Paul asks, how would you suggest we bring up the use of the Enneagram in a work environment? I'd love to have something like this, but I'm unsure how to best proceed. Sounds like maybe they want to bring it into their management practice. So yeah, what do you think?
That's going to be real dependent on each workplace. Some places that's going to have to come from HR, and other places it can rise organically in your team just from conversations you've had. If it comes from a place of, holy cow, I have been working on this, I've learned so much about myself, and it's amazing. Check this out. Uh, Sometimes that organic way of getting it in is helpful, but definitely if you're in a place that takes recommendations for self-growth and development, absolutely recommend the Enneagram.
Okay, so maybe we would, if we want like a formal approach to this, maybe we would
Yeah. Or
route
I
it
do
through.
workshops on it. I'm happy to do workshops corporately or individually to help people understand the Enneagram better. Again, if you just get the book and work through it yourself, it's going to organically come from you, the difference it makes, and it's going to get a little contagious with people you're around. But
Excellent.
maybe a multi-pronged approach there.
Excellent. Yes, and Paul says thank you. I think that's a great way to get started. We do have about 10 minutes. So revisiting what you were saying about like a ritual or an approach to assuaging our anxiety, I think that would be pretty useful for the folks on the call. So if that's something that you'd love to share, let's make it happen.
Awesome. Okay, the first thing would be, recognize when you are anxious. That's the first thing. And then second, come up with your strategy of what mental trick are you going to use to reconnect your thought process. We've all seen movies with the highly trained Delta forces and whatnot, these people that are able to stay so calm in the midst of literally the world blowing up around them. Or Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the Enterprise in the Next Generation Star Trek episodes, who is always so calm and able to stay thinking instead of reacting. So recognize when your anxiety is going up, but come up with something. For me, it's counting back from 100 by sevens. And I can get the first ones pretty quick now because I've done it a lot, but I can't go to zero fast. So 100, 93, 86, 79. And just in those few seconds, I've had to do some thinking. A friend of mine was never great at memorizing things, but could always get the first line of a song or a poem, or the Gettysburg Address is what she uses. Just start, with something like that, but find something that works for you, some mental trick that you can call up just like that, that makes you think. That would be the first thing. Then I like to accompany that with a physical sensation. So for me, I like to pinch my thigh. And that's really subtle. I mean, it's noticeable, obviously, if somebody is watching, but I can do it very subtly. But it just gives couples that physical sensation with that cognitive action. And those together have a powerful effect, more than just one individually. And then breathe. After you do that, take a deep breath. And if you combine those things, you can come up with a ritual that works for you, one, as a reminder, and two, it will just become a habit or an instinct that when you are anxious, you can do those things and it'll bring you back.
I do the 5 things I can see, 4 things I can smell or whatever, right? Like 3 things I can hear. And I think that just grounding yourself in that way is super helpful. And Melissa, we are often taught that we have to get back into our emotions, but when we're cycling like that, when we're spiraling and we're not able to relate to people well enough, it can be really damaging. And so I feel like there's some conflicting messages on that, but we just have to look at the context, right?
We want
Like,
to be
yeah.
emotionally intelligent, but part of being emotionally intelligent is regulating your emotions. And that neocortex is what sets us apart. Other mammals have neocortex, but ours is a greater quantity and ratio to the rest of our brains. It's wired differently. And that is what allows us to be fully present. So yeah, when we go from our base reptilian brain of just instinctual acting to intentional thinking, then we've bridged that entire gap. And then we are able to say, okay, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I doing?
One thing that's also been really helpful for me, and I don't know if other folks on the call feel the same way, but co-regulating with someone else who is educated about this stuff but may not be in the same emotional state. Like if I'm whipped up into a frenzy and I've got a buddy who understands what I'm talking about, but also has a little bit more like emotional calm in that moment, like finding someone I trust to co-regulate with, and not somebody I can like just vent to or necessarily say, okay, let's escalate this and make it worse, but like how do we co-regulate? How do we communicate about this? And I've been that person for some people, and I have also been the person who needed it. And I'll tell you what, you talk about relationships in the workplace being so important. Having a co-regulation buddy is a pretty powerful relationship to build.
That's brilliant. And be careful who you choose. Don't choose someone that's going to jump down in the hole with you, but somebody who's going to bend down and reach to help you come out of that hole.
Yeah.
Because fanning the flames and get misery loves company, or that herd mentality, that's the last thing you want to go toward. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And when we vent or something like that, I have found that in just so many situations, like venting just makes things worse. Like it's the intentional co-regulation where we're saying, okay, no, we're gonna solve this. We're not just gonna gripe about whatever it is and just walk away feeling terrible. We're gonna actually work towards a solution. Yeah.
I have set a timer on my phone to say for 30 seconds, I'm gonna gripe, and then the timer goes off, I'm done. Now we're doing better. I did want to say the Everybody Loves Raymond show is a perfect laboratory for following the anxiety. If you want to test out and develop your skills of following the anxiety, watch some reruns of that. See who's anxious. See what they do when they're anxious, who they try to share it with, who will grab that anxiety football from them and take it somewhere else. It's brilliant. It's frustrating to watch, but it's brilliant in developing those muscles for detecting anxiety in its path.
And not taking it on as our own responsibility to repair, but rather saying, how am I going to manage my own response to this?
If somebody hands you a ball of anxiety, you can decline it. You don't have to take it.
That would probably take some practice. I feel like and let me just say, in our profession, again, we are often the people who end up grabbing that football because we want to make sure the project's successful. We want to make sure everybody's having a good time. You know what I mean?
As a pastor, that is what I'm supposed to do, right? No, I don't help you grow if I take your anxiety. I help you grow if I set a boundary and help you regulate your anxiety. Then we both grow.
Oh, excellent words for us to kind of tidy up this conversation with Melissa. And I will say to everybody who's listening here on the call, or maybe on our later YouTube sessions, Melissa has personally offered this particular service to me on numerous occasions in our conversations about how to manage my own emotional overwhelm. And if you're looking for coaching, if you're looking for somebody who can really help your team elevate to that next level, I can personally endorse Melissa's services. I know that you are extremely skilled at this. So with our final few minutes here, how do folks get a hold of you if they want to dive into this more? And how do we introduce you to teams? Because I think with the economic situation, the more we can reinforce our teams and prevent attrition, the happier everyone's going to be. So what do we do to get a hold of you?
Thank you. Go to melissaebken.com or lightlifeandloveministries.com. On either one of those sites, you will see the melissaebken.com will have a tab called links, and that's a bit of a roadmap, kind of a link tree sort of thing that will get you to a lot of different services I provide. I have a lot of PDF downloads there. Lightlifeandloveministries.com has a resources tab that has a bunch of stuff in there. Most of it is free. There are a few things for $7 or $17 that will help you get started, or just reach out to me, send me an email, and let's talk about it.
Love it. Those resources that you've got. So for everybody, those links are in the chat. If you want to grab them, I will also put them in the follow-up email that comes out to everybody who is subscribed for this particular service. So we'll have those links and more available from Melissa to make sure that you're able to access those resources, because they really are tremendous to getting your teams up to speed emotionally and kind of spiritually in some senses too. So I think that's delightful.
And I would love to add one more thing if I have a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't care what your religion is. A religion is just a group of people that agree on a certain set of beliefs, but we are spiritual beings. Find a way to connect with that is broader than all of us. And I do have a link on there too that helps you find the best way you can do that for yourselves. We all do it differently, but that grounding spiritually will help you to know your own value so that it comes from within. From that, it's not something you have to find in the workplace or in relationships or anywhere else, but that is the biggest step toward resilience there is.